Greetings, my fellow intellectuals and bookworms. It's time for another video for you. Now, I am going to give you another video today, a book review, but I'm going to give you a political video. I promised, and so I'm going to deliver. Sorry if it fades in and out. I keep getting annoying reminders on passwords for some of my emails on my iPhone. It works without it, so why do I care enough to fucking admit it? Stop bothering me. Anywho, I'm going to be giving you a political video. I know that I'm going to piss off people no matter what I say because that's how fucking political debate is, and especially how it is in the U.S. Today our topic is President Reagan, President of the U.S. from 1980 to 88. Now, if I was a conservative, I would piss off other conservatives by, for example, not pointing out any of his faults or criticizing him for any policy. People would complain about it. And now, I'm actually quite liberal in a lot of outlooks, but I'm a war hawk, and I believe that women should have traditional roles. They should be able to vote, but to a certain extent, we need women in the home, and they should have the right to work, but we should make an effort to keep, I would like to say keep women in the kitchen, but that's not exactly what I mean. You get what I'm trying to say. We need traditional mothers as a society to raise our kids to actually have a system working. But you get the point. So, also in favor of guns, very, very non-liberal positions. But anywho, as a liberal, I'll get condemned for saying literally anything good about Reagan. He has his faults, yes, but most liberals like to say Reagan is like literally the devil. Like, to some, he's literally Satan. Now, granted, they also make both George Bushes Satan, and in all honesty, George Bush is terrible. Both Bushes were reasonably terrible, but you get the point. Anywho, with Reagan, he's a complicated man. Yes, you had one of the climaxes to the Cold War, but the part about Reagan single-handedly defeated communism, which is a conservative ideal, is completely false. Yes, he added arms race spending, which the Soviet Union couldn't handle and probably made it happen earlier, but the Soviet Union by 1980 was so top-heavy that it would collapse regardless of any action. But he still helped, so it's at least half true. But when I say that it's wrong, it pisses off a lot of Republicans because they basically worship him like a fucking saint. Saint Ronald Reagan. Now, here's his two main failures in the 80s. He failed on dealing with a drug crisis, which, in this case, had been simmering for decades with America's failed drug policy, but which got worse under his term. The adding crack cocaine. We already had the highest level of addiction in the world, it's just this made the situation worse. And rather than actually dealing with the root causes of his problem, he fucking mishandled it to shit. Now, granted, almost anyone would have done so, because the only real solution is to legalize all illegal drugs, tax them, regulate them, and adulterants of it, and purity test them and ban contamination. But that solution, even though 90% of Americans think the war on drugs is a failure, very few are willing to take that step. It would save us a lot of money. We spend about $100 billion on the war on drugs a year in prisons and DEA alone. And it's worth about $1 trillion. We're the largest consumer of illegal drugs in the world, and we have the largest market. If the government taxed it like alcohol or tobacco, about $200 billion would be generated, and we'd cut costs by about $100 billion. So it would save a fortune, and it's a sensible policy. Again, I would never do drugs because any idiot off the street can tell you that drugs are fucking bad. But I believe that people have a right to use them because they're going to be using them anyway. Might as well make it safe. And the revenue from this tax, a good chunk of it would be plowed into treatment clinics, needle exchanges, and other harm reduction projects. And the savings would definitely help because we have an $800 billion a year budget deficit, and essentially there's no programs we can cut. Medicare is $1 trillion. Social Security is $1 trillion. It's basically fucking mandated. Spending is $3.8 trillion, and taxes is $3 trillion. That's mandated, so you can't fucking cut either of those. Military spending would be, even though it's high, and some say way too big, it's actually reasonable for the U.S. economy, and effectively, it's a stupid idea to fucking cut it because our country's safety depends on it, and it would be a bad political decision. So effectively, another $1 trillion is fucking off the table. The next largest program is food stamps, which helps poor people get food to eat, which is $200 fucking billion. Can't cut that, so effectively you're left with nothing. Foreign aid is only like $18 fucking billion a year for U.S. aid, which is effectively nothing, and it buys support in third world countries where we want it, and it helps people, and it creates economic growth, so there's fucking no reason to cut that. So you effectively can't cut anything. So the only way to get out of it is raise taxes, but wealthy people complain about that. So you can't. So essentially, the only solution to the war on drugs is to end the fucking war on drugs. You can't legalize weed and shrooms and expect that the system will get better, because we failed at the war on drugs since 1950 something. And it's kind of like saying, rather than junk a broken system, let's just slightly reform it and keep the wheels in place. The machinery will still imprison lots of people and waste shit tons of taxpayer dollars. It's just that some people won't be locked in prison anymore, and people who are in prison almost certainly won't be freed. So that's a fucking stupid policy. I said tax it, regulate it, and release every single person in prison for drug possession, and possibly even people in prison for drug dealing. Again, but with opinion against it, opinion has only recently turned in favor of legalizing weed in the U.S., and even then, it's only slightly over 51% nationwide, and only 10-ish states have done it. Shrooms have only been fucking legalized in, I believe, fucking Colorado. But you get the point. This policy is seen as too radical because it's like, weed is different from hard drugs. Cocaine is bad. Cocaine fucking kills you. Yes, it's just people are going to use it anyway, and since it's such a huge market, it hurts the government not to take a fucking cut of it. And there would be money left over for other programs, for other use, almost certainly, in terms of this. So it's not that Reagan almost certainly didn't see that that committing more resources to the war on drugs would be a failure. It's that politically speaking, conservative evangelicals and conservatives in general are in favor of committing more resources to the war on drugs. And it's just that it's literally unthinkable on the conservative side to do anything about fucking drugs. It goes back to the idea of those pot-smoking hippies in the 60s. Fuck them. Let's throw them in prison because drugs. So he might have known that it was a failure, but he almost certainly knew that even if political opinion was in favor of legalizing drugs, he knew that it would be essentially politically toxic to vote yes on it, and he wanted to get reelected more than anything else. So he might have seen the problem, but he couldn't imagine the solution out of it. In his handling of the AIDS crisis, was a fucking catastrophe. Now, granted, it was a new disease. It had never been seen before. There were no fucking protocols. But the CDC had shit tons of resources ready to go, just waiting for the mobilization order. And Reagan either refused or didn't care enough to issue the order. As a result, AIDS got a foothold in the U.S., and hundreds of thousands of people were infected who are dying slowly now, even with treatment, or dead. And a public health catastrophe was made. Now, granted, the people affected at first were gay people and drug dealers and drug users, and Reagan's conservative evangelical base was like, fuck drug dealers. Gays are evil homosexual faggots who piss off the Lord by their very existence. They get this disease, it's God's fucking punishment, you dumb atheist motherfucker. You're a liberal, fuck you. Gays deserve to be killed. This is the gay plague. Of course, it started affecting other people, but by that time, there was still no opinion to do anything. So, in all fairness, even if he had acted more decisively, there's no guarantee it would have turned out differently. So those are two fucking catastrophes of his presidency, but it could have ended up fucking worse. And to a certain extent, in our criticism of him, is he was so evangelically Christian, and he pushed and he kind of wanted the U.S., he kind of supported some of those theocratic policies that the right wing supports now, those ideas like fucking faith-based programs, which is government funding to churches for social programs, which is a guise for breaking the wall of church and state, shit like that. He was basically the 1980s Ted Cruz. And to a certain extent, we have fucking him to blame for the fact that George W. Bush, an even more religious and more theocratic person, came into power. And we have him to blame for the fact that even Obama, despite being really liberal, continued faith-based programs. So it means that even when we have a liberal in office, for the most part, atheist rights are ignored and violations of church and state are allowed to continue. In God we trust, on the money, one nation under God, and the Pledge of Allegiance, monuments, crosses on public property with public funds, faith-based programs, and then the indirect things like banning abortion, banning comprehensive sex ed, banning stem cell treatments, banning immunotherapy, banning evolution being taught in schools. And banning immunotherapy and stem cells is basically saying, fuck you, I want you to die because those stem cells come from dead babies. You should be happy you have fucking cancer. Fuck those cancer patients. And that's another criticism. But he handled foreign policy well, so he does well on that. And another fucking thing. The treaty he got signed banning CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons, which caused a hole in the fucking ozone layer, had a side effect of lessening global warming substantially. It turns out the CFCs were also contributing to global warming. It's just we're dumping so much carbon into the environment that methane from permafrost is melting enough that even with this thing removed, the climate is fucking warming. And it's fucking ironic as hell and as fuck, because if he was told, hey, if someone went back to 1990 and told him, hey, I'm from the future, your policy of banning CFCs has helped the climate crisis, he'd be like, fucking hell, man, climate change isn't real. You know what I mean? So, as a president, he mismanaged, as I said, the increasing drug problem in AIDS, mainly the emergence of crack in AIDS. But anyone could have done that. And the political support necessary to make a change there, honestly, could have stopped even some of the most determined politicians. But to a certain extent, it's also a lack of moral courage. He could have said, fuck it, I don't care about getting a second term. I want to make legitimate change. And that's his main downfall. For all his talk about faith and doing the right thing and belief in his values and shit like that, and moral courage, he lacked moral courage when it was needed most. And I think future generations can and probably will condemn him for that. But again, the CFCs banning CFCs helped us and bought us time on climate change. So there's that. So I'm gonna give him a B- as a presidential grade because, again, was just scratching my face. He didn't intentionally do it, but it sure as fuck helped. This is Sean Hartnett wishing you a good day and saying like, comment, and subscribe. I will have more of this type videos out soon, and we'll have another book review for you.